to maintain control. Now, Hannah Arendt, who was one of the great philosophers of the 20th century, was a presence in the trials after the Second World War, and she saw firsthand a character called Adolf Eichmann, who had really been the bureaucrat behind the processes around the Holocaust. And what struck her was how banal this man was, how he was so ordinary, and what that demonstrated was the kind of the smallness, the small-mindedness of just following orders, doing what you're told, going with the expectations. It's conforming. It's conforming to what is expected. So Adolf Eichmann is the other side of the coin to somebody like Hans Litten. Adolf Eichmann was being controlled. Hans Litten was demonstrating power. So coming back to the story of Hans Litten and Adolf Hitler, there is something very clear about how this kind of fragile ego will do anything to avoid accountability. They will avoid any sort of what they believe to be personal humiliation, and they will lash out and they will try to make an example of people that shine a light on that. So we see this playing out very clearly with Trump. This is the approach that he is taking. He is a small mind trying to maintain control with small actions by cancelling TV shows or bringing cases, like trying to sue his opponents. It's not masterful, it's not clever. It's whack-a-mole. It's trying to stop these different aspects. Now, the reason why that is so illustrative is because it shows the difference between small minds trying to control individual instances as opposed to a movement which is bigger than any single person, which will continue through shared enterprise, storytelling, generational trauma and experience. So this all applies in terms of, well, what do we do? Well, what can we do about this? What we can do is, at the point where we see that he is unraveling in this way, we double down, because the more that he tries to control, the more it becomes clear that he cannot control everything. He cannot control us, our thoughts, our relationships, our networks. That's why he tried to ban Maya Angelou. That's why the far right always turn to the smallness of trying to push away the big ideas, because it's focusing on what's the threat. You should be afraid. You should be worried about what I'm going to do to you. Well, how about the fact that you're unraveling is a sign that you're the one who's breaking, that you're the fragile ego, because that is what we are seeing. And whilst it can be an effective tool for people to see, okay, you step out of line, you speak up, this is what will happen, which we saw in the Second World War clearly, it is clear that there is an impact to it. And so we can learn from history that these personalities are really dependent on how they are perceived. That is their whole MO, if you like. It's about perception. It's about how they are perceived. And if that shifts, if that changes, then they lose everything, because what they are demonstrating isn't real. Authoritarianism is only real because it uses violence and control. If it wasn't for violence and control, it would just be an idea. But it's the real life threat that is an effective way to paralyze people, because that's how fear works. But if we can intellectualize it, look at history and put it into context and say, this is actually a sign of somebody losing control, then it gives us more strength to work together, back each other up, and double down on the things that we are saying. It makes us more likely to speak out and come together, because the more of us that do it, the harder it is for them to play whack-a-mole. I mean, you can just break it down to, maths. So keep doing what you're doing. If you want to look at how you can use it, it is simply about using your voice, being free. What can be helpful in these times is a reality check. So we look to somebody like Hans Litten, and that is a terrifying story. It's almost like a cautionary tale. But Hans Litten couldn't have known how history would play out. He couldn't have predicted the Second World War. But what he could do was see what was happening in that moment. And I tell you one thing, if there had been more Hans Littens, would we have even got to that point? Because there's something very real about individuals not being held to account and continuing to engage in these behaviours simply because nobody felt it was their responsibility. But if we remember that power is collective, then it is everybody's responsibility. And we have each other to support and protect one another, just in the same way that neighbours are looking out for their community in the United States if ICE agents descend. We do this already. This is a way that we survive. But what is helpful is checking in with what is at play. They are using fear and intimidation. That's classic. That's classic, authoritarian playbook. But what's classic for us is supporting one another, using our voices, telling stories, being able to stay true to our values, because they don't understand that. That's like it's like speaking another language. If you're able to have integrity and stay with your values, that's like a complete superpower to people who have no concept of things like empathy or integrity. It baffles them. That's our strength. That's what works. So let's reality check, right? That's the thing. Fear is the tool. What do we really have to fear? What do we really have to fear? We have more to fear if we don't hold individuals and systems to account than if we actually use our voices. You are at risk either way. The threat remains either way. How are you going to rise to the challenge? We don't all have to be a Hans Litten, but what we can be is a force of our own values. If we live our own values, we don't even think about it. We don't even need to think about it, because the individuals who don't play by the rules, who think they can control, will be held accountable. And we can do it in ordinary lives. That's the power that we have, is speaking up and holding individuals and systems to account. That's what true power is. So I want to hear more thoughts on this. I think it's really important. I think now more than ever, we need to be crystal clear about what we need to do. And I really feel strongly that this is the point in time where we double down. Because the more they try to impact on individuals, when they try to do things like silence free speech, when they use intimidation, when they use violence, that's when they're losing control. And that is where we are at our most effective. So let's do it.